Hello everyone, it's Suryan once again, and today I'm going to go over the buttons and some of the other button combinations and attacks and special moves that come with the King of Fighters 15. So to start with, King of Fighters 15 is a 4-button fighting game. It will include a light punch, a light kick, a heavy punch, and a heavy kick. In the Neo Geo terminology, or the terminology that I'm more comfortable using, the light punch will be A, the light kick will be B, the heavy punch will be C, and the heavy kick will be D. So A, B, C, D. And I'll also go over how these buttons are going to work strategically and how they'll be implemented in the match more often than not. So to start with, in King of Fighters 15, buttons go through a proximity effect, unlike Street Fighter V, where whether you're far or close to your opponent, the button is going to be the same. In King of Fighters, it's a different story. So this is Kyo's far standing C, and this is Kyo's close C. You'll notice that they're very different animations. His far C is a gut punch of sorts, whereas his close C is like an uppercut with his left hand. Now, generally, in King of Fighters terminology, or at least the terminology I'm familiar with, the further normals, the ones that involve proximity, I tend to call them standing normals. I don't usually include the far, so this would be a stand A, stand B, stand C, stand D. And if it's a close normal, I'll call them close A, close B, close C, and close D. These normals can also be done crouching. This will be crouch A, crouch B, crouch C, crouch D. And like any other fighting game, you can also do these normals in the air. So that will be jump A, jump B, jump C, jump D. And it's important that you also use these normals, these jumping normals especially, with your hops to create the offense and defense necessary in your game with King of Fighters. So if you want to jump in with Kyo, you can do something like a hop C or a hop D. If you want to control the space, you can also use a hop C or you can use a hop D especially. Or you can neutral hop into a D, and it's going to be very difficult for the opponent to try to come in on this. They'll likely get starched if they try to run in. Like so. There is a fifth normal that you need to be aware of in King of Fighters, and that is the CD normal. And the CD normal is basically you hit the heavy punch and the heavy kick normal, as that's why it's called CD. At the same time, you'll get a different kind of normal. In Kyo's case, it's the shoulder barge over here. He can also do this in the air. But one thing to note is that CDs cannot be done while crouching. As you can see, I only get Kyo's crouching C. If I want to do a CD, I have to do it standing or in the air. Now I'll break down the most commonly used normals and how they sort of play into the general game. I'll start with the one that you're likely to see the most, which is the crouching light kick, crouching B. Crouching Bs like these are the main way that you're going to open someone up in King of Fighters. They are the quickest low that you will have, and they are the most reliable way that you will get big damage in this game. And they're also chainable to each other. So you can confirm them and go into the combo of your choice. Now for standing A, this is a very important normal to stop a lot of the hop attempts, because it is shoulder height and you don't have to really risk a whole lot, unlike the DP where I showed in the previous example, where if someone were to hop in and you do a DP, they'll probably block it and you'll get punished for it if you try to react to it. It's not to say that you can't do it, but it's going to be harder, whereas the jab, you don't have to work too hard, and it's also minimal risk. Like so. One thing to note about these jabs though is that they tend to whiff on crouching opponents. See, this is Kyo's standing A, and it will not hit Iori no matter what I do. and I'm relatively close by too. It's going right over his head. The ideal way to beat something like this would be if the opponent was to crouch and hit with something that will make the jab whiff while he crouches, while also not leaving himself vulnerable to the jab in the process. So something like a crouching B or a sweep. And there you saw the punish. It will work every single time. Now if you're further away, obviously the crouch B is probably going to be a bit more difficult to land. And this is where you can start to use things like your sweep instead. And unlike a game like Street Fighter, where sweeps cannot be cancelled and they're almost always punishable, in King of Fighters you can cancel a lot of the sweeps. Like so. So don't be discouraged from using sweeps too much. Be sure to cancel them and you should be fine. Now moves like the crouching A, they're very good for frame traps especially. And that's largely going to depend on the character as well. Some characters it's going to be their close A, some characters it's going to be the crouch A. But generally a good number of characters can use their crouch A to set up a frame trap. And quite often these frame traps also end up leading to combos in and of themselves. So in Iori's case, his crouching A is plus on block and this will frame trap, and it also is in and of itself a combo into his close C. And just as you saw there, Kyo is set to basically press close C or C as soon as Iori does a crouch A. What I'll do from here is I'll do a crouch A into close C forward A. And this is a frame trap. If Kyo tries to press anything, he will get beaten out of it. So an interesting thing to note about frame traps though is that they're not really great at opening up an opponent that's going to be there to sit there and defend themselves. It's not something that if an opponent was trying to block the best they could, there's nothing to really be afraid of. So if we look at this string here that I do with Iori, which also is a combo in and of itself, there's nothing that Kyo really has to worry about in terms of blocking. He can stand block or crouch block. Neither of these things is going to open him up. It's only if he presses a button or decides to jump that he will get clipped by this string. Now we'll move on to things like close Cs. Interestingly, compared to other fighting games, in King of Fighters, the close heavy button tends to be relatively fast, if not the fastest button a character has. In the case of Iori, this close C of his is the fastest button in his kit. Which means he can almost always punish things, especially if the punish is right next to him. He can almost always get a very heavy punish. But of course not all punishes are going to work like this. Sometimes range is going to be a factor, so you may not always get the fast, heavy starter to punish. So with that in mind, just be sure to understand the situation and use the appropriate normal to punish accordingly. CDs tend to bring with it a few different properties that are going to be interesting and crucial to a character's game. For starters, for some characters, and you'll notice this with Kyo, he moves forward quite a bit. Also, these hitboxes can be quite chunky as well, and all of them lead to a knockdown. In comparison to, say, all of these other normals here, they just basically keep Iori in place, with the exception of his sweep. But most of these other normals, whether it be close or far, all they do is just inflict hit stun, which isn't bad. But what a CD will do is it will cause a knockdown. In the case of the grounded CD, it'll cause that wall bounce there, and you may be able to follow up with some combos. And the same can be said for the hop CD. This is in contrast to the other jump buttons that will only inflict hit stun. The other crucial thing to note about the CD normal, especially the standing CD normal, is that unlike a lot of other normals in the game, or really any other fighting game for that matter, these can be whiff cancelled, meaning that the button doesn't even have to come out and it can be cancelled right away, like so. You can use this technique to further increase the range of some of your special moves. So if you'll notice, Kyo's first Rekka here will not reach Iori from this far away, but when he does the CD cancel, the CD whiff cancel, it now reaches Iori, so you can use that for its utility. A part of the reason why this is the case is because a lot of these CD normals tend to be a fair bit slow. They do have a lot of startup, so you can use this whiff cancel to sort of work around that startup, in a sense. The other good thing about these CD normals is that they can cover, because of how chunky they are, they'll be able to cover multiple areas of the screen to a degree. As long as you're standing in the right spot, it will swat out people in the air, and it will also be able to swat out people who are in the ground and still remain relatively safe while giving you a good reward. So a common scenario you might see, especially if you're playing Kyo, is you might do something like that, and you notice how the sweep whiffed there when Iori did the jump. So a way to work around this is Kyo can do something like this, and that is good, and it will work for both situations. Whether Iori stayed on the ground, or whether he pressed some sort of light button like a jab or something, or whether he jumped, the standing D will be able to swat him out. But all he's going to get is the standing D. Unless he has meter, he's not going to be able to convert that into a lot of damage. This is where a CD is going to become very useful. It's also worth noting that these CD attacks, if they land on counter hit, will lead to significantly more reward. You'll notice here that when I do Kyo's hop CD, I can't get his Rekka on the first hit. But now when I land it as a counter hit, now I can get the first hit of the Rekka. Which is why it's a good idea to use your hop CDs to beat out backdashes, because backdashes will be airborne but also will put the opponent in a counter hit state. Now another important thing to know about King of Fighters is that there are command normals, and these are going to play quite an important role depending on the character that you play. And they'll either come in the form of a overhead, or they'll come in the form of a slide. So in the case of Iori, his forward A doesn't really do anything noteworthy, but that's fine. But his forward B, however, is an overhead. You notice how Kyo had to stand up to block this? It's also worth noting that a lot of these command normals can be chained into, and when they are chained into, they will lose their overhead property. Notice how Kyo stayed blocking low, even though I was able to chain into the forward B. So just keep that in mind as well. And then similarly, like Iori's overhead, Chizuru has a slide that's a low, and you will have to block this low. This is a command normal, this is down forward D, and this is going to be very good for Chizuru because she can then use this to go into max mode conversions, like so. Command normals can also be done in the air, and this is also very character specific. In the case of Kyo, he has the jumping down C, and this is incredibly important to Kyo's game. This is where he gets a lot of block stun and a lot of hit stun, and it leads to some of the most damaging combos that he has. Likewise, Iori has something similar. It's the jumping back B. It's called the taco usually in the King of Fighters nomenclature, in the King of Fighters terminology, and it's a cross up, and this is also what makes Iori very tricky and very offensive heavy. And if you're not exposed to that, that can be difficult to block, and you will likely get opened up if you're not careful. Now another thing you can do with your attacks is you can do special moves, and each of these special moves is going to be unique to each character, and they will involve using a particular motion with your controller, your arcade stick, and the button. And the strength will make a difference as to how the strength of the button that you choose will make a difference to the special move. So if we look at Kyo's run grab here, this is the light version of the run grab. It's about 2/3 of the screen, whereas with his heavy one, it goes almost full screen and it will connect. And we'll look at his Dragon Punch, which is forward, down, down, forward. This is the light one, and this is the heavy one. You'll notice the heavy one tends to go up a bit higher. And some of the properties like the startup and the invincibility and all that will change. And that's going to vary between the strength of the special that you use. And again, once again, these things are going to differ on a character-to-character basis. Also, with regard to special moves, what you can also do them while running, and you may come across some issues as you're doing this. For instance, Kyo has his Rekka, and he also has his DP. What you might see happen quite often is you might try to run, and you want to do the Rekka, but what you'll get is a Dragon Punch instead because the inputs overlap, like so. Just like that. The way to work around it is you do the quarter circle. If you want to get the quarter circle motion out, do the quarter circle into up forward. And this way you will always get the quarter circle forward motion that you were hoping for. Also, another thing to note about the some of the complex inputs that you may come across, so like the half circles and stuff like that, or some of the supers and all that stuff, those get a bit complicated. One thing to bear in mind is that outside of things like quarter circle forward, a lot of the half circles you can actually use like an easier approach or like cheat them almost. So if you look at Kyo's run and grab here, I do the correct input, which is a proper half circle back. But what you can also do with half circles is you can input the main directions, which is forward, down and back, and then input the kick, you will still get the command grab. Like so, you will get the command grab anyway. So use whatever is comfortable to you. That is a bit uncomfortable to me, so I just tend to use the correct input, but you can also use a combination. You can even do forward, quarter circle back. Just make sure that you are hitting forward, down and back in whatever permutation or whatever combination of the inputs that you have in mind. Another button combination to know in King of Fighters is the A plus B, or the roll. This is often called the emergency evasion. If you simply press A and B together, you will do a forward roll. If you hold back while doing this roll, you will roll backwards. So a key thing to note about rolls is that they are strike invincible. From the start and at the very end, you can be punished. I'll demonstrate this. As you saw there, Chizuru just rolled right through Kyo's attack. So you are completely strike invincible when you start this roll. But you can be punished at the tail end of it. Another thing to note about rolls is that they are completely throw vulnerable from all points. So whether you try a throw the start or the end of the roll, the opponent will always be throwable throughout the entire roll. So what are your rolls used for? They're generally used to escape very sticky situations where there's a lot of pressure that you think you can get away from. As you saw earlier with Kyo's stand D going right through. The other thing that it's used for is to also beat fireballs. So I'll demonstrate this with Chizuru's fireball. So the reason this is good against some fireballs is because there are some fireballs or some projectiles that can be difficult to jump compared to a game like Street Fighter, for example, where you are more or less expected, where jumping is the obvious answer. In King of Fighters, some projectiles are chunky enough where jumping in isn't the recommended answer. Like so. For projectiles like this, you are recommended to roll through them instead if you want to beat them clean. And then get your punish accordingly. Now, I alluded to throws earlier when talking about roles, and throws are going to be quite important in King of Fighters. To do a throw, you basically make sure that you're pretty much point blank to an opponent, and then hit either forward or back, and then hit either C or D when you want to do the throw. So this will be the forward, backward, forward, backward. So a key thing to note about throws in KOF is that the heavy punch version will always throw them forward, and the heavy kick version will always throw them backwards. It's also worth noting that you cannot run and throw easily. To circumvent this, you want to tap back immediately and then immediately press heavy punch or heavy kick, the throw of your choice. Like so. Throws are designed to beat opponents that block too much or are being overly defensive. So as you see here, there's not much I can really do to open up Chizuru. So I'll have to throw her to actually start getting some damage in. Now to beat a throw, you want to also yourself input a throw button yourself. And it doesn't matter whether you input the heavy punch or the heavy kick. Both of them will count to breaking the throw. So I'll demonstrate this when Chizuru tries to throw me. So she's just thrown me with her C version of a throw, which will throw me forward. And all I have to do is just press either one of the directions, forward or back, heavy punch or heavy kick, and I will break the throw. Like so. I can do the same with the heavy kick. Now a crucial thing to note is that throws can be beaten by making sure something is already active on the screen. This will get rid of the throw property altogether. Or if you're airborne, a regular throw will not be possible. As I've demonstrated before in the backdash. But the general way, if you want to call out someone who's doing a throw, it's recommended to go low, just because you will need to be standing to tech the throw. And because they're standing to tech the throw, they will likely get opened up by the low. And there you see, I tried to tech the throw there, but I got clipped by Chizuru's low instead. Some characters would have something that's called a command throw. This is a special move of sorts. It's basically a more advanced throw. So in the case of Iori, he has that command grab there. It's called a scum gale, I think, by most people. So this is a throw. You cannot block this. If you do block this, you will get clipped by it. Now a crucial thing to note about command throws is that they cannot be teched, no matter what you try. So I'll have Iori do his scum gale on me, and I'll try to tech it like I did with Chizuru's throw earlier. And you saw, I did try to tech the throw, but I got thrown anyway. So I cannot tech this throw no matter what I do. And this is especially important for command throws that are one frame fast, because most of the standard throws in the game are also one frame fast. So if your command throw and the regular throw were to collide, there's a good chance that the command throw is going to beat it out clean. The recommended way to beat out a command throw is either by doing a jump or a backdash. And because command throws are not tied to a button that already exists, like a close C or a close D, there is an actual whiff animation that's associated with it, and you can punish that animation. And as you saw, that was a counter hit state when the punish landed on Iori for whiffing the command throw. You can also backdash this, because the backdash is airborne on the very first frame, so a command throw will not be possible, or any throw for that matter will not be possible. Like so. So command throws are going to be useful for dealing a little more damage than the regular throw, and it will be a very good incentive for the opponent to not block. They will have to jump or backdash, and there'll be a surefire way to get to open them up to more attacks. And that'll be everything for all the attacks and all the maneuvers that you can do in the King of Fighters 15 that are meterless at least. For the next portion, I will go over some of the metered options that you can implement in your game and how you can then best manage your meter and how to select your teams accordingly based around meter, because meter is going to be a very important aspect of this game. But I hope to see you there, and if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, send out a comment, and we'll go from there. We'll try to learn together, right? Until then, do have a nice day and take care.